As I strolled through the bustling mall, the afternoon sunlight poured through the skylights, casting a warm glow over the marble floors. Adjusting my tie, I loosened the collar of my Brooks Brothers suit, the heat from the sun making the fabric feel stifling. I had just wrapped up a fruitful lunch meeting at the Riverside Bistro, where I finalized the next phase of a significant project for Meditech, the billion-dollar enterprise I had painstakingly built from scratch. Achieving that level of success wasn't easy, but I'd always believed the sacrifices were justified, at least, I used to think so. Walking toward the parking garage, my mind ran through the rest of the day's packed schedule. That's when I heard it, a voice that made me stop dead in my tracks. Zara's voice. My eldest daughter. "Did you see what Dad was wearing to the board meeting yesterday?" she said, her tone laced with mockery. "That tie was so last season." I froze, my heart sinking as her words registered. Her tone wasn't just casual teasing, it was cutting, almost cruel. Instinctively, I stepped behind a large marble pillar and peered around the corner. There she was, sitting at a cafe table with her siblings, Lucas and Sophia, my 17-year-old triplets. A sea of luxury shopping bags surrounded them, and their carefree laughter echoed through the air. At first, I felt a familiar pride swell in my chest, my children, my legacy, all together. But then, her words replayed in my mind, and the pride turned to something else. "Mom says he has no sense of style," Zara continued, swirling her iced latte with a perfectly manicured finger. Lucas snorted, barely glancing up from his phone. "At least he's good for the credit cards," he quipped. "Speaking of which, I need him to sign off on the Porsche before the transfer." The Porsche? Transfer? My grip on my briefcase tightened, my knuckles turning pale. What was he talking about? "As if that matters," Zara said with an eye roll. "Mom says once he signs the company over on our 18th birthday, we won't need his permission for anything anymore." My chest tightened as the words sank in, each one heavier than the last. Hidden behind the pillar, I stayed rooted in place, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Uncle Ray says he's already got the adoption papers ready," Zara added in a hushed tone, though not quiet enough to escape my ears. "Mom's boss is going to be our real dad, finally, legally, and everything." The air left my lungs. Adoption papers? Uncle Ray? Ray Aguilar, CEO of BioAdvance, my fiercest competitor. He'd been a family friend for years, or so I'd thought. Close to Sherry, my wife. Too close, apparently. He'd always been attentive to the kids, often checking in when I was away on business. I'd naively seen it as harmless support. Lucas let out a short laugh, his grin sharp and cold. "Did you see his face when we asked for those new cars? He actually thinks we're keeping him around after the transfer." "Like, what does he think this is? A family sitcom?" Zara smirked. "Mom says he'll probably end up in some retirement home in Florida. At least this way, he gets to pretend it's his choice to step down." Every word felt like a dagger, and I wanted nothing more than to step out from behind that pillar. To confront them. To demand answers. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it. Sophia, the youngest of the triplets, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her coffee cup. Unlike the others, she wasn't laughing. "Maybe we shouldn't," she began softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Oh, grow up, Sophia," Zara snapped, her tone as sharp as broken glass. "Mom and Ray have everything lined up already. The lawyers are just waiting for our birthday. Besides," she added, her voice turning colder, "he's not even our real father. Mom told me Ray's been there from the start. Dad was just too clueless, too busy obsessing over his precious company to notice." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me as those words sank in. I stumbled, my hand gripping the cold marble pillar for support. Not their real father. Lucas leaned back in his chair, stretching casually as if they were discussing nothing more serious than weekend plans. Remember when he tried to ground me for borrowing his car? Mom and Ray thought it was hilarious. They took me to that Lakers game anyway, right under his nose. Zara laughed, the sound harsh and devoid of any affection. Ray says Dad's losing his edge at work. The board's already worried about his decisions. Once the transfer's done, it'll be a breeze to push him out completely. Honestly, we're doing him a favor. Sophia's lips parted to speak, her voice trembling. But what about? Zara shot her a piercing glare, cutting her off. Don't even think about warning him, Soph. Mom says you've been acting strange lately. Remember who takes care of us. Ray's going to be our father. That's just how it is. Don't ruin this for us. The three of them grabbed their bags and sauntered toward the mall exit, their carefree laughter fading into the distance. I remained hidden behind the pillar, my entire body trembling. My own children, my wife, and my so-called best friend, conspiring against me, right under my nose. How had I missed this? The truth came crashing down all at once, like an avalanche I couldn't escape. Every moment I'd ignored or explained away resurfaced in painful clarity. The business trips where Ray happened to be in town. Sherry's insistence on handling the kids' paperwork herself. And every time BioAdvance, Ray's company, had somehow outpaced mine in the market. I felt a wave of nausea. The buzzing of my phone in my pocket jolted me back to reality. Sherry. No doubt wondering why I wasn't home yet for dinner, family dinner. The thought of it made my stomach churn. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted my tie, straightened my shoulders, and headed for the parking garage. On the surface, I was composed, but inside, I was a storm brewing, each thought sharper and more volatile than the last. Sliding into my car, I gripped the steering wheel tightly before pulling out my phone. Scrolling through my contacts, I stopped at the name I needed. Kurt, I said when the line connected, my voice steady but cold. It's Enrique. Remember that favor you owe me? I need access to some security footage. And Kurt, this stays between us. The drive home was a blur as my mind worked furiously, assembling the puzzle pieces of betrayal. I didn't know yet what my next move would be, but one thing was certain, this wasn't going to play out the way Sherry and Ray had planned. Not even close. Later that night, the faint glow of computer monitors illuminated the security office. Kurt Osborne, Meditech's head of security, sat hunched over his desk, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he pulled up files one after another. The low hum of servers filled the room, a backdrop to the tense silence as I stood behind him, my tie loosened and my focus razor sharp. Here we go, Kurt muttered, pulling up a video. February 15th of last year. Ray's car, parked in your driveway at 2:03 p.m. You were in Singapore for that medical conference. He squinted at the screen, his eyes narrowing. He didn't leave until 11:47 p.m. I stared at the grainy footage, my jaw tightening. The black luxury sedan was unmistakable, and so was the woman who emerged to greet him, my wife. Sherry stepped out moments later, wearing the silk dress I'd given her for our anniversary. Ray followed, carrying a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag of takeout in the other. They disappeared into the house together, and the footage rolled on, hour after hour, until Ray finally left. His posture was casual, almost smug, as though he had every right to be there. Show me the front door camera from that day, I said, my voice low but firm. Kurt nodded, pulling up the additional footage. There it was again, Sherry welcoming Ray with a smile far too warm to be innocent. Her hand brushed his arm as she led him inside, the familiarity between them unmistakable. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, it was a routine, a betrayal that had been unfolding under my nose for who knows how long. Anything else? I asked, my voice barely audible as the weight of it all pressed down on me. My chest felt like it was caught in a vice, the pressure nearly unbearable. Kurt hesitated, his fingers hovering over the mouse. This one's worse, he warned, opening another folder. With a click, the screen filled with footage from Ray's office at BioAdvance. Sherry sat across from him, casually handing over a folder I recognized instantly. The Meditech logo, the confidential stamp, the unmistakable markings of one of our top-secret projects, the arterial stent we'd spent years developing. My jaw tightened as the timestamp on the footage came into view. It aligned perfectly with the date BioAdvance had filed their suspiciously similar patent, just days before we were set to go public with ours. She's been feeding him information, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. For years, Kurt confirmed grimly. My grip on the back of his chair tightened, my knuckles white. Anything else? Kurt opened yet another file. Remember that shareholder vote last year? The one that blindsided your board? I nodded, my stomach twisting. Look at this. He brought up a series of emails. Sherry and Ray's correspondence filled the screen, strategies, timelines, and detailed plans to position the triplets as the rightful inheritors of Meditech once they turned 18. Sherry wrote extensively about how she was conditioning the kids to see Ray as their real father, reinforcing the idea that I was an absentee parent too consumed by work to care about them. They're setting you up for a complete takeover, Kurt said, his voice heavy. Once the shares transfer to the kids, Ray and Sherry will have everything they need to push you out of the company. They're already drafting the paperwork. My mind raced, the puzzle pieces snapping together with sickening clarity. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I devoted to building Meditech, they had twisted it into a weapon against me. And my own children, the very reason I'd worked so hard, were being used as pawns in their game. I need more, I said, my voice cold and steady. Everything you can find on Sherry, Ray, and the kids. Every meeting, every phone call. And I want their medical records. Kurt paused, turning to look at me. Medical records? What are you thinking? My stomach churned as Zara's words echoed in my mind. He's not even our real father. I need to know if there's anything else they've lied about, I replied. Kurt nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Moments later, a series of documents appeared on the screen, blood types, genetic markers, and paternity tests. My breath hitched as I scanned the results. They're yours, Kurt said quietly. The DNA matches. No question about it. The faint relief I felt was fleeting, quickly drowned by a fresh wave of anger. Sherry had twisted the truth, manipulating my children into believing I wasn't their father. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd poisoned their minds, warping their sense of family to serve her own agenda. What do you want to do with this? Kurt asked, breaking the silence. Straightening, I took a deep breath, my mind sharpening as the first threads of a plan began to form. We're not going to confront them, I said firmly. Not yet. Kurt frowned, his confusion evident. Why not? You've got enough to take them down. Because criminal charges would hurt the company, and the kids, I replied, my voice hard. I won't destroy everything I've built just to bring them down. There's a better way. Kurt leaned back in his chair, waiting. Then what's the play? We make them think they've won, I said, my voice cold and resolute. We let them move forward with their plan. But we'll dictate the timeline. We'll control everything. For hours, Kurt and I pored over files, dissecting every detail of Sherry and Ray's betrayal. Each stolen document, every incriminating email, and each deceitful conversation became a weapon in my arsenal. As the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, a clear path began to form in my mind. Yet, one thing gnawed at me, the triplets. They were victims of Sherry's manipulation, not architects of this betrayal. Protecting them, even from the full weight of the truth, had to be part of my plan. "Kurt," I said as I gathered my belongings, "keep a close eye on the kids, especially Sophia. She's not as sold on their plan as the others. I saw her hesitate yesterday, there's still hope for her." Kurt nodded. "Understood. And Ray?" A faint smile crossed my lips. "Let him bask in his illusion of victory. It's always darkest before dawn." My gaze hardened. "We'll make sure his dawn never comes." That evening, I sat alone in my study, staring at the family portrait hanging on the wall. Taken 2 years ago, it showed Zara, Lucas, Sophia, Sherry, and me, all smiling together. At the time, I thought we were happy, a solid family. Now, I could see the fractures that had been forming beneath the surface even then. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sherry, a reminder about a family dinner planned for Sunday. My fingers hovered over the reply button. For a fleeting moment, I considered canceling, but then a thought struck me: this dinner was an opportunity. It would be the perfect stage to play the role they expected of me. "See you Sunday," I typed, my face betraying none of the storm inside. As I set the phone down, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in weeks. Sherry and Ray thought they'd won. They thought I was blind, weak, and walking willingly into my own defeat. They had no idea what was coming. Underestimating me was their first mistake. It would also be their last. Sunday evening arrived, and I took my place at the head of the long dining table. Sherry had gone all out, our finest china, flickering candles, and an elaborate spread that filled the room with the aroma of rosemary lamb. The triplets laughed together, their voices blending with the soft strains of classical music in the background. It was the picture of a perfect family dinner, but I knew better. This wasn't a celebration, it was theater. "Dad," Zara said, her tone light but tinged with a subtle sharpness, "did you remember to review the paperwork for the company restructuring?" I tilted my head, feigning confusion as I reached for my wine glass. "Paperwork? What paperwork?" Lucas let out an exaggerated sigh, shaking his head as if I were a forgetful old man. "The documents Mom left on your desk last week. We need everything finalized before our birthday. Uncle Ray said timing is critical." There it was. The slip. They thought they were being clever, but Lucas's eagerness gave him away. The glint of pride in his eyes was impossible to miss. He believed he was playing a pivotal role in their scheme. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass thoughtfully. "Ah, yes. I remember now," I said casually. "I'll take another look tomorrow." Their expressions shifted, the faintest flicker of relief passing between them. They thought they had me exactly where they wanted me. He was proud of his role in their scheme, proud of the part Ray had carved out for him in this master plan to overthrow me. "Ah, yes, those papers," I said with a light chuckle, as if it were all a passing thought. "I'll get to them soon. You know how it is, always something urgent at the office." Sherry leaned in, refilling my glass with practiced grace, her smile polished to perfection. "Darling," she said, her tone dripping with casual authority, "you really should let the kids help more. It's time they start understanding the business. After all, it'll be theirs soon enough." I nodded slowly, deliberately, letting my gaze linger on her just a moment longer than was comfortable. Her smile flickered, the faintest crack in her composure, before she steadied herself. "Well," I said, raising my glass, "to family. To the future." The triplets clinked their glasses with enthusiasm, their laughter ringing through the room. Sherry joined in, her smile unwavering. But as I sipped, my eyes drifted towards Sophia. She hadn't touched her glass. Her gaze was locked on her plate, her brow furrowed in deep thought. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that evening, after everyone had left the table, I found Sophia in the garden. She sat on the stone bench by the fountain, staring at the rippling water. The garden lights bathed her in a warm glow, but her expression was heavy, conflicted. "Sophia," I called softly, walking toward her, "out here all by yourself?" She looked up, startled, then quickly composed herself. "Just needed some air," she said. I eased onto the bench beside her, giving her space. For a while, we sat in silence, the trickle of the fountain filling the void. "You seemed quiet at dinner," I said finally. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "I've just been thinking about a lot of things," she murmured. I waited, sensing she wasn't finished. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes clouded with doubt. "Dad," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "do you trust Mom?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, sharp, unexpected. I leaned back slightly, studying her face. "Why do you ask?" Her gaze darted around the garden, as though afraid someone might overhear. "It's just, sometimes I feel like she's hiding things from us." "From you." I took a deep breath, forcing my expression to remain neutral. "Sophia, trust is complicated. It's not just about what people do, it's also about what they choose not to do." I paused, searching her face. "Do you trust your mother?" She looked away, her silence louder than any words she could have spoken. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, back at the office, Kurt and I sifted through the latest surveillance footage. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together, but gaps still remained. "Here's something new," Kurt said, pulling up a clip. This was taken at BioAdvance's corporate retreat last month. On the screen, Ray and Lucas strolled across a pristine lawn, deep in conversation. Ray's hand rested on Lucas's shoulder as he spoke, his gestures animated. Lucas, for his part, nodded eagerly, his expression full of the kind of pride that only comes from seeking approval. "Look at this," Kurt said, zooming in. "Ray's giving him something." I leaned closer, narrowing my eyes. Ray handed Lucas a folder, thick with documents. Lucas opened it, skimming through the pages, his smile wide and satisfied. "What do you think it is?" Kurt asked. "My guess," I said, my voice cold and measured, "Ray's already giving Lucas access to Meditech's secrets. He's grooming him to take over." Kurt frowned, his brow furrowing. "That's risky. What if Lucas messes up?" "He won't," I said, shaking my head. "Ray knows exactly how to manipulate him, just like he's manipulated Sherry and Zara. But this also tells me something important." "What's that?" "Lucas is more involved than we thought," I replied, my mind already racing with possibilities. "And that makes him a vulnerability we can exploit." Kurt nodded, his expression sharpening. "So, what's the next move?" "We accelerate the timeline," I said, the plan crystallizing in my mind. "They've underestimated me for too long. It's time to turn the tables. Church Industries is ready to move on the research division, but I want the manufacturing sale finalized immediately," I said, my tone sharp with purpose. "If we can get Ray to bite before the triplets' birthday, it'll force his hand." "And Sherry?" Kurt asked, his gaze steady. "She'll fold the moment Ray's empire collapses," I replied, staring at the screen in front of me. My jaw tightened as I envisioned the fallout. She's tied her entire future to him. And when it all comes crashing down, the kids will see the truth. They won't have a choice. The weeks that followed were a blur of calculated maneuvers. Jody Park, my trusted legal advisor, worked around the clock to finalize contracts with Church Industries. Frankie Hampton, my forensic accountant, meticulously unraveled BioAdvance's fraudulent financial practices, feeding the damning intel to the SEC and FDA. Every move, every leak, was timed with surgical precision. Meanwhile, I played my role flawlessly. At board meetings, I stumbled over my presentations, feigned forgetfulness, and allowed whispers of my supposed decline to circulate. Ray and Sherry believed they were winning, convinced that I was crumbling under the weight of their betrayal. But in reality, the walls were closing in on them. One evening, as I reviewed the final documents for the manufacturing sale, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach churned. It was a photo of Ray and Sherry, seated close together in a dimly lit restaurant. His hand rested on hers, their expressions unmistakably intimate. This wasn't a business meeting, it was personal. Beneath the photo was a brief caption, "They think they've won." I stared at the screen, a storm of emotions swirling within me, anger, betrayal, determination. I didn't know who had sent the message, but it only confirmed what I already knew. Their time was running out. The morning of the triplets' 18th birthday arrived under a deceptive calm. Sunlight poured through my office windows, illuminating the stack of carefully prepared documents on my desk. Everything was in place. Today, the trap would be sprung. Kurt entered with his usual briskness, a thick folder in hand. "It's done," he said, placing it on my desk. "The SEC and FDA have everything they need. Ray's empire is running on fumes." "Good," I replied, my voice steady. "And the sale to Church Industries?" "They're ready to announce as soon as the ink dries," Kurt confirmed, his expression tense with anticipation. "The manufacturing sale will go public immediately after." I nodded, the plan solidifying in my mind. "What about the triplets?" "They'll be at the estate for the birthday dinner," Kurt said. "And Ray's invited himself. He'll be there with Sherry." "Perfect," I said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips. By the time I arrived at the estate, it was buzzing with activity. Caterers moved seamlessly through the kitchen, and the triplets were gathered in the living room, impeccably dressed. Zara was already commanding attention, her laughter echoing across the room. Lucas lounged against the fireplace, exuding confidence. Sophia, however, stood apart, her gaze flicking to me with an expression I couldn't quite place: concern? Doubt? Perhaps both. "Dad!" Lucas called, crossing the room with a grin. "You made it. We thought you'd be tied up with work." I smiled, keeping my tone light. "Not today, son. Today is about family." Zara joined us, her designer dress flowing elegantly as she moved. "Did you bring the paperwork?" she asked, her impatience barely concealed. "Uncle Ray said we'd handle everything tonight." I raised an eyebrow, feigning mild confusion. "Paperwork?" "The company transfer," Zara said, her tone sharp with irritation. "You didn't forget, did you?" Before I could respond, Sherry appeared, Ray trailing closely behind. Her smile was wide, polished, and entirely too rehearsed. Sherry radiated confidence, her diamond necklace catching the light as she moved. Her smile was as polished as the evening's meticulously planned details. Ray, ever the charmer, clapped Lucas on the back before turning his attention to me. "Enrique," he said smoothly, his tone dripping with insincerity. "I hope you don't mind me joining the celebration. After all, it's a big day for the kids, and for Meditech. Of course, I replied, forcing a smile. His grin widened, exuding smug self-assurance. He believed he was untouchable. That made what was coming all the sweeter. Dinner was a masterclass in presentation, with Sherry orchestrating every detail to perfection. The triplets beamed as they unwrapped gifts, each one more extravagant than the last. Ray rose to make a toast, his words laden with thinly veiled triumph. "To the future," he said, raising his glass, "and to the incredible legacy these young people are about to inherit." The room echoed with clinking glasses and smiles, but my focus never wavered. As the evening wound down, Lucas leaned toward me, his voice low but insistent. "Dad, let's get the paperwork done. We've waited long enough." I nodded, standing from my seat. "Of course. Let's handle it in the study." The group followed, Ray and Sherry exchanging triumphant glances. They thought this was their moment, the culmination of their years-long betrayal. Underscore 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 underscore. In the study, I took my place behind the desk, the documents spread before me. The triplets stood in a line, Ray hovering at their side, and Sherry watching with barely concealed anticipation. "These are the transfer papers," I said, gesturing to the stack. "Once signed, Meditech's shares will be held in a trust under your names." Lucas stepped forward eagerly, reaching for the pen. But I held up a hand, stopping him. "Before we proceed," I said, my tone measured, "there's something I need you all to see." With the press of a button on my desk, the large screen on the wall flickered to life. A video began to play, footage of Ray and Sherry in intimate meetings, their whispered conversations, their careful plotting. The triplets' expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief as the extent of their manipulation became clear. "What is this?" Zara demanded, her voice shaking. "It's the truth," I replied, my tone steady. "The truth about Ray, about your mother, and about the lies they've built around you." Lucas turned to Ray, his face pale. Is this real?" Ray stepped forward, his usual charm faltering. "This is just a smear campaign. Enrique's desperate, trying to—" "Enough," I said sharply, cutting him off. "There's more." The next video began to play. It revealed Ray's secret properties, his hidden affairs, his fraudulent dealings. The damning evidence filled the room, leaving no room for rebuttal. Sophia was the first to break the silence. "You knew about this?" she asked, her voice trembling as she turned to Sherry. Sherry opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her silence was deafening. "You lied to us!" Zara cried, her voice rising with anger. "About everything, about Dad, about Ray, about who we are." Lucas turned to Ray, his face contorted with fury. "You said you cared about us, about the company. Was that a lie, too?" Ray raised his hands defensively. "Lucas, you don't understand." "Don't," Lucas snapped, his voice cutting through the tension. "Don't lie to me anymore." The fallout was swift and brutal. Sherry stammered, grasping at excuses, but the weight of the evidence crushed her attempts. Zara stormed out of the study, tears streaming down her face. Lucas followed, his expression a mix of rage and betrayal. Only Sophia stayed behind, standing silently as the dust began to settle. Ray's composure had completely crumbled, the confidence he'd wielded for years reduced to nothing. "It's about truth, about consequences." Ray glared at me, his anger barely contained, then turned abruptly and walked out. Sherry hesitated for a moment, visibly shaken, before following him into the night. Sophia stayed behind, her face etched with uncertainty and sorrow. She stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "Dad. I didn't know." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I believe you," I said. "I hate that you had to see all of this, but it's better you know." Tears welled up in her eyes. "What happens now?" "We rebuild," I said. "Together." The next morning, the headlines were unavoidable: BioAdvance CEO under federal scrutiny, corporate espionage exposed, Ray Aguilar's downfall shakes the industry. Ray's crimes and Sherry's involvement were plastered across every outlet, dissected in excruciating detail. While the rest of the world focused on the chaos, my priority remained clear: mending the trust of my children and safeguarding Meditech's future. As the sun rose over the estate, I sat quietly on the patio with a steaming cup of coffee, scrolling through the relentless stream of news coverage. Watching the world unravel Ray's empire was satisfying in its own way, but it also reminded me how much had been lost in the process. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Jody. "They've got him in their sights," she said without preamble. "The SEC and FDA are moving fast. Between the product defects and financial fraud, they're closing in hard." "And Sherry?" I asked. "She's named in the filings," Jody replied. "Without Ray backing her, she's got no way out." Good. By midday, the triplets were scattered. Zara hadn't come home after storming out the night before. Lucas had locked himself in his room, refusing to answer. Only Sophia joined me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Lucas won't even look at me," she said quietly. "He's so angry." I thought for a moment. "He's been lied to for so long, Sophia. It's going to take time for him to sort through all of it." "And Zara?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "She's strong, but this will hurt her deeply. She built so much of herself around the lies your mother told. It'll take her time too." Sophia's eyes dropped to her mug. "I feel so stupid for believing them." "Don't," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't your fault. They controlled what you saw, what you thought you knew. But you saw through it when it mattered. That takes real strength." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the daughter I'd raised, the one who cared deeply, thought critically, and stood for what was right. The headlines continued to dominate the news cycle, unraveling the full extent of Ray's deception. By the end of the week, his empire was in shambles. The SEC froze his accounts, the FDA issued urgent recalls of BioAdvance defective products, and the company's stock plummeted into oblivion. Ray's personal life fared no better. His wife, the woman Sherry had once dismissed as a minor obstacle, filed for divorce, and the media gleefully exposed his hidden affairs. Sherry's fall was just as swift and brutal. The divorce papers I had filed became public knowledge, and her association with Ray's schemes left her few allies. The same society friends she had relied on distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by scandal. When I learned she had moved into a modest apartment, I felt a fleeting pang of pity, quickly extinguished by the weight of her betrayal. Lucas remained distant, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Zara was harder to read. She returned home after a few days but kept her distance, her smiles brittle and her conversations guarded. Only Sophia stayed close, her quiet resolve to mend what had been broken giving me hope. A week after the fallout, Lucas appeared in my office. He lingered in the doorway, his shoulders rigid, his expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "I looked up some of the stuff you showed us," he said, his voice low. "The records, the patents, the fraud, it's all real." "Yes," I said simply, waiting for him to continue. He stepped inside, hesitating before sitting across from me. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why did you let it get this far?" I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Because fighting too soon would have backfired. They would have painted me as desperate, trying to shift blame. I needed the truth to be undeniable. Lucas frowned, his hands gripping tightly together. I still don't understand why they did it. Why, Mom? His voice cracked, and he looked away. Your mother made her choices, I said gently. Ray exploited her weaknesses, but that doesn't excuse her actions. He nodded, though his jaw stayed tight. I don't know if I can forgive her. That's up to you, I said. But don't let their actions define you. You're better than that. He stared at me for a long moment, then abruptly stood. I need time. You'll have it, I assured him. He left without another word, but I knew it was a step forward. Zara came to me next. I found her in the garden one evening, her heels clicking against the stone path as she approached. She stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I hated you, she said bluntly, her voice steady but filled with pain. For years, I thought you were the bad guy. I know, I replied, keeping my voice even. Her lip trembled as she bit down on it, struggling to maintain her composure. Mom made it so easy to believe. She made Ray seem like the perfect father. And you, her voice faltered, and she looked away. I was so wrong. I stood slowly, taking a step toward her. You weren't wrong, Zara. You were misled. There's a difference. Her shoulders shook as tears welled in her eyes. How do I fix this? How do I make it right? You don't have to fix it alone, I said. We'll figure it out, together. She hesitated before stepping closer. When she finally let me pull her into a hug, years of tension seemed to dissolve. I held her as she cried, the weight of the lies she'd carried finally lifting. By the end of the month, the dust began to settle. Ray's trial loomed, and the evidence against him was damning. Sherry faded from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. The triplets were still grappling with the aftermath in their own ways, but small steps of healing had begun. And as I looked out over the sprawling estate one quiet morning, I realized that, for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope for the future. Sherry's attempts to salvage her reputation were futile, her involvement leaving her isolated and powerless. Her apologies were shallow, and her efforts to rebuild connections fell flat. For me, though, the true victory was watching my children begin to heal. Sophia threw herself into her future with a quiet determination, her acceptance into a prestigious biomedical engineering program reigniting her sense of purpose. Lucas, with his analytical mind, channeled his energy into ethics compliance, driven by a newfound desire to prevent the kind of corruption Ray embodied. Zara, to my surprise, enrolled in a psychology program, seeking to understand not only herself but the manipulation she had endured. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the patio, the warmth of the day fading into the coolness of twilight. Sophia joined me, her smile gentle but genuine. You know, she said, settling into the chair beside me, I think we're going to be okay. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw the strength and resilience she had uncovered within herself. Yes, I replied, my voice steady with conviction. We will be. As the weeks turned into months, the chaos of Ray and Sherry's betrayal began to feel like a storm that had finally passed. My children were finding their footing again, though the scars remained, and rebuilding trust required patience. Lucas was the hardest to reach. Though he acknowledged Ray's actions, his guilt and pride kept him distant. He rarely attended family dinners, citing his focus on preparing for his internship at an ethics compliance firm. I gave him space, knowing that pushing too hard would only push him further away. Zara, on the other hand, grew closer. She frequently visited my office, sometimes with questions about her psychology courses, other times just to talk. Each conversation felt like another step toward the relationship we had once lost. One evening, as we walked through the garden, she surprised me with a question. Do you think people can really change? She asked, her tone thoughtful. I paused, turning to face her. What do you mean? Mom, she said quietly. Ray. People like them. Do they ever really feel sorry for what they've done? Or is it just a game to them? Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her experiences. I thought about Sherry's hollow apologies, her refusal to accept responsibility even as her life unraveled. I thought about Ray's arrogance, his lack of remorse, and his unrelenting scheming. I think some people can change, I said after a moment, choosing my words carefully. But it requires a willingness to face the truth about themselves, to admit what they've done and take real steps to make amends. Not everyone has that courage. Zara nodded slowly, her expression pensive. I don't think Mom does. I didn't respond immediately. She wasn't looking for reassurance, only clarity. I let the silence stretch as we resumed our walk, the garden peaceful around us. Sophia, ever the diplomat, worked tirelessly to bridge the gaps between us. She kept Lucas informed about the family, gently nudging him toward reconciliation. Her persistence paid off one sunny Sunday afternoon when Lucas finally agreed to join us for lunch. He arrived with hesitation written all over his face, but it was a start, a step toward mending what had been broken. Sophia's quiet determination had brought us together, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the beginnings of a new chapter. The tension hung thick in the air as we gathered around the table. Lucas's responses were polite but curt, his eyes rarely meeting mine. Zara made valiant attempts to draw him into conversation, but he sidestepped her questions with the same guarded demeanor. It wasn't until Sophia mentioned her upcoming internship at a vaccine development lab that Lucas's icy exterior began to thaw. That's impressive, he said, his tone softening. What kind of work will you be doing? Sophia's face lit up as she launched into an explanation of the project, her passion evident in every word. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time in months, Lucas seemed genuinely engaged. He asked thoughtful questions, offering insights from his own studies. Watching them talk, I felt a flicker of hope. The walls Lucas had carefully built around himself were starting to crack, and Sophia's quiet determination to mend our family was making a difference. Meanwhile, Sherry's attempts to reach the triplets grew increasingly desperate. She sent letters and left voicemails, each a mix of hollow apologies and deflections. Zara deleted the messages without a second thought, her patience for Sherry's excuses long gone. Sophia read the letters but never responded, her silence a quiet refusal to let her mother's words sway her. Lucas, however, kept a pile of unopened envelopes on his desk, a constant, silent reminder of the mother he couldn't forgive. One evening, I found him in his room, sitting at his desk and staring at the stack of letters. Do you want to talk about it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He shook his head. There's nothing to talk about. She made her choices. She did, I agreed, stepping closer. But holding on to anger can weigh you down. You don't have to forgive her, but you should think about letting go of the resentment. Lucas scoffed, the bitterness clear in his voice. Easier said than done. It is, I admitted. But you don't have to do it alone. He didn't respond, but he didn't dismiss me either. It was a small moment, but one I held on to. As the months passed, I immersed myself in work at more ethical medical innovations. The company thrived, earning global recognition for its focus on affordable healthcare solutions. Sophia often visited the lab, her sharp mind and innovative ideas quickly earning the respect of my team. Watching her transform into a confident, driven young woman was one of my greatest joys. Zara also found a way to turn her experiences into something meaningful. Her studies in psychology focused on family dynamics and trauma, and she frequently shared her insights with me. Our conversations became a source of healing, a chance for both of us to reflect and grow. Lucas, however, remained a work in progress. While he excelled in his internship, his personal growth was slower. He kept his emotions guarded, his walls still firmly in place. But now and then, I caught glimpses of the man he was becoming, one driven by integrity and a genuine desire to make a difference. One evening, Zara invited me to attend a seminar she was presenting at her university. The topic was the long-term impact of parental betrayal on young adults. Her presentation was deeply personal, drawing on her own journey and the lessons she'd learned over the past year. As I sat in the audience, watching her speak with poise and confidence, pride swelled within me. Zara had taken the pain of betrayal and transformed it into something meaningful, something that could help others navigate similar challenges. After the seminar, she found me in the crowd and wrapped me in a tight hug. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "For believing in us," she said. "Even when we didn't deserve it." Her words lingered in my mind long after the evening ended, a reminder that the bonds we were rebuilding were stronger than those we'd lost. By the end of the year, the triplets had each begun to find their own paths. Sophia flourished in her biomedical research, Lucas carved out a name for himself in ethics compliance, and Zara delved deeper into her studies, determined to help others understand and heal from trauma. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined us. What mattered most was that, as a family, we were moving forward, together. I opened the desk drawer and retrieved a slim folder, placing it in front of Lucas. "This contains everything, evidence that goes beyond the reports and media coverage," I said, my voice steady. "I want you to see for yourself what Ray has done, not just to me, but to our family, to the company, and to the people who depended on us." Lucas hesitated before reaching for the folder. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing meticulously documented emails, financial records, and internal memos. I stayed silent, letting the weight of the truth speak for itself. He flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief and finally to anger. "This," he began, his voice trailing off. "This is so much worse than I thought." I nodded. "Ray is a master manipulator. He knows how to exploit weaknesses, how to spin lies that sound like truth. But the facts don't lie, Lucas." He sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "He told me you were the one who sabotaged him. That you couldn't stand him being close to us." "I understand why you might have believed him," I said carefully. "He's charismatic, persuasive, and he knows exactly what to say to plant doubt. But everything in that folder is verifiable. I didn't destroy him, Lucas. He did that to himself." Lucas stared at the open folder, the pages spread out before him. "Why didn't you just tell me all of this before?" "Because I wanted you to come to your own conclusions," I replied. "If I'd forced this on you, it would have felt like I was trying to control the narrative. I needed you to see the truth when you were ready." He leaned forward, closing the folder but keeping his hand on it. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him for this." "That's your decision," I said gently. "But don't let his actions poison your future. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what he did, it's about freeing yourself from the hold he still has on you." Lucas looked at me, his defenses softening for the first time in a long while. "It's going to take me time." "I'll be here," I assured him. "Whenever you're ready." He stood, the folder tucked under his arm. "Thank you," he said quietly before leaving the room. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step toward trust, toward healing. In the days that followed, Lucas seemed lighter, more present during family meals and conversations. He still carried the scars of betrayal, but for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope that he might find his way back to us completely. Meanwhile, Zara and Sophia continued to flourish. Sophia's work at her lab earned her a spot on a groundbreaking research team, and Zara had begun volunteering with a local nonprofit, working with children affected by family trauma. Their resilience inspired me, reminding me that while the past had left its marks, it didn't define us. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Lucas raised his glass. "To moving forward," he said, his voice steady. Zara and Sophia exchanged surprised glances before smiling and raising their glasses too. "To moving forward," I echoed, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, it felt like we were walking it together. I arrived at the cafe Zara had chosen, its sleek interior filled with soft chatter and the clink of silverware on plates. She was already seated near the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. As I approached, she glanced up, offering a small but genuine smile. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Of course," I replied, settling in. "It's good to see you." For a moment, we sat in silence, the bustling noise of the cafe filling the space between us. Zara's gaze drifted to her coffee, her usual sharp confidence softened by something I couldn't quite place. "This place used to be Mom's favorite," she said finally, her tone contemplative. "I wasn't sure if I wanted to come here, but it felt right somehow." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about letting go of anger and resentment," she began, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I've spent so much time being angry at Mom, at Ray, and even at you. But the truth is, I was really angry at myself." "You have nothing to blame yourself for, Zara," I said gently. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "I believed them, Dad. I let myself believe all the lies Mom told me about you, about Ray being some kind of hero. And I hurt you because of it." "You were manipulated," I said. "That's not your fault. Sherry and Ray were experts at weaving a narrative that suited their agenda. But you saw through it when it mattered most. That's what's important." She looked up, her expression earnest. "Do you really think we can come back from all of this? As a family?" "I do," I said without hesitation. "We already are. It's not going to be perfect, and it won't happen overnight. But every step we take together is another brick in the foundation." Zara nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I want to be part of that. I want to rebuild, not just with you and Lucas and Sophia, but with myself too." Hearing those words felt like a weight had been lifted. Zara's journey toward healing wasn't complete, but this was a monumental step. We spent the rest of the lunch catching up on her studies and her plans for the future. She spoke with excitement about her psychology program and the possibility of working with families dealing with trauma. As we said our goodbyes, she hugged me tightly. "Thanks, Dad. For not giving up on us." "I'll never give up on you," I said. The family continued to grow stronger in the months that followed. Lucas began sharing more openly, no longer as guarded as he once was. Sophia's research earned her recognition at her lab, and Zara embraced her studies with a passion I hadn't seen before. Family dinners became a space for laughter and honesty, where past wounds were acknowledged but no longer defined us. We were far from perfect, but we were together. One chilly winter evening, as we gathered around the fireplace, Lucas brought out an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, he stopped at a picture of the triplets as children, their faces lit with joy. "Do you remember that day?" Lucas asked, glancing at me. I smiled. "I do. That was the trip to the lake. You all begged me to let you swim even though it was freezing." We laughed, the warmth of the memory spreading through the room. For the first time in years, it felt like we weren't just rebuilding a family, we were becoming one again. And in that moment, I knew that the scars we carried had become the foundation of something unbreakable. Lucas sat on the edge of the couch, his posture tense, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence stretching between us like an invisible wall. Finally, he broke it. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he said, his voice low. "About Ray, about Mom, about us. I nodded, giving him space to continue. I was so caught up in what Ray was saying, he admitted, his gaze fixed on his hands. He made me feel like I was special, like I was destined for something big. I thought I was doing the right thing, following him. But all I was doing was letting him use me. Ray is good at that, I said gently. He knew exactly how to play to your strengths and your insecurities. That doesn't make you weak, Lucas. It makes you human. He let out a bitter laugh. It feels like it makes me stupid. I ignored so many signs, Dad. I even ignored you. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You're not stupid. You're someone who wanted to believe in something bigger than himself. That's not a flaw, it's a strength. But now you see the truth, and that's what matters. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed. It can, I said firmly. But it's not about fixing the past, it's about building something new. It's about who you choose to be moving forward. Lucas nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I want to make things right. I don't know how, but I want to try. That's all I've ever wanted, I said. We sat there for a while longer, the conversation gradually shifting to lighter topics. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a step, one that felt monumental. In the weeks that followed, Lucas began to take active steps to rebuild his relationships. He started spending more time at family dinners, engaging in the conversations he had once avoided. He sought out Sophia for advice on navigating the complexities of his internship, leaning on her perspective and insight. One evening, after dinner, Lucas pulled me aside. I've been thinking about joining the family business, he said, his voice steady but cautious. I want to contribute to what you've built, to help make it better. Ethical healthcare, innovation, it's something I can believe in. His words filled me with a quiet pride. I'd be honored to have you on board, Lucas. But remember, this isn't about me. It's about finding a way to make it your own. I know, he said with a small smile. And I'm ready for that. While Lucas was finding his footing, Zara's transformation continued to inspire me. Therapy had given her tools to understand and reshape her identity, and she used that growth to help others. Sophia remained the glue that held us all together, her unwavering optimism and thoughtful approach bridging gaps and healing wounds. One afternoon, the three of them surprised me at the office. Zara carried a cake, Lucas had a folder of ideas for the business, and Sophia was armed with her usual infectious smile. We figured it was time to celebrate, Zara said, setting the cake down on my desk. Celebrate what? I asked, amused. Us, Sophia said simply. Our family. The fact that we're still here, together. As I looked at my children, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. The journey had been painful, and the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, but they had become part of our story, one of resilience, growth, and unwavering love. And as we laughed and talked that afternoon, I realized that we weren't just rebuilding a family. We were creating something stronger than anything we'd had before. Lucas fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, a nervous habit he hadn't displayed since he was a child. I don't even know where to start, he admitted softly. Wherever you feel comfortable, I encouraged, keeping my tone steady. I knew this wasn't easy for him, and the last thing I wanted was to make it harder. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the coffee table as if searching for answers in its polished surface. It feels like everything I thought I knew was a lie, he confessed. Ray, Mom, even myself. I remained silent, allowing him the space to untangle his thoughts. I looked up to Ray, he continued, bitterness seeping into his voice. He made me feel important, like I had a future worth fighting for. But it was all manipulation, wasn't it? He didn't care about me. He just wanted to use me to hurt you. His words struck hard, but I kept my composure. "Lucas, you're not responsible for what Ray did. He was a master manipulator who preyed on your trust." He looked up, his eyes filled with pain. "But I let him. I believed him. I turned my back on you because it was easier to accept his lies than to admit I might be wrong." "That doesn't make you weak," I said firmly. "It makes you human. We all want to believe in the people we admire." Over the next several weeks, Lucas and I began rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. He carried a heavy burden of guilt, and his anger often bubbled to the surface in unexpected ways. He lashed out at Ray, at Sherry, and even at himself. But gradually, he started channeling that anger into something productive. He decided to take a leave of absence from college, immersing himself in understanding how everything had gone wrong. He devoured every article about Ray's fraudulent empire, dissecting the schemes and deceptions with the same analytical mind he once used to solve complex puzzles as a child. One evening, Lucas approached me with a stack of papers. "I've been researching corporate ethics," he said, placing the documents on the kitchen table. "I want to understand how someone like Ray could get away with so much for so long." I nodded, impressed by his determination. "It's a complex system, but understanding it is the first step toward fixing it." He offered a faint smile. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. I've applied for an internship with a compliance firm. They specialize in preventing corporate fraud." I couldn't hide my pride. "That's an excellent step, Lucas. I'm proud of you." His expression softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of the boy who used to look up to me with unfiltered admiration. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." As Lucas delved deeper into his studies, he began to grasp the extent of the damage Ray and Sherry had inflicted, not just on us, but on the industry as a whole. The realization fueled his determination to make amends, not just through words, but through meaningful actions. One day, he approached me with a bold idea. "What if we established a scholarship for students studying corporate ethics? Something to encourage the next generation to do better." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's an ambitious idea." He shrugged, his confidence returning. "I want to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. I think this could be a good start." We spent weeks refining the concept, working together to create a program that would not only fund education but also provide mentorship and real-world experience. Lucas took the lead, presenting the proposal to several firms and securing funding from a network of business leaders who shared his vision. Sophia's work in ethical medical technology had flourished, earning her recognition as a rising star in the field. She was relentless in her pursuit of solutions that blended innovation with accessibility, and her influence began to shape industry practices in tangible ways. She often spoke at conferences, her speeches captivating audiences with their blend of technical expertise and heartfelt conviction. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation, she called me, her voice alight with excitement. "Dad, they want to fund my research," she said. "The vaccine project I've been working on, it could actually happen." I could hear the joy and determination in her voice, and it filled me with pride. "That's incredible, Sophia. You've worked so hard for this. I know you'll make it a success." "Thanks, Dad," she replied softly. "For always encouraging me to dream big." Sophia's achievements became a source of inspiration for our family, a reminder that even in the aftermath of betrayal, greatness could emerge. Meanwhile, Lucas's scholarship program continued to grow, evolving into a broader initiative that partnered with universities and businesses to foster integrity in corporate practices. Watching him transform from a young man burdened by guilt into a leader driven by purpose was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. As for Zara, her marriage to Daniel brought a sense of stability and joy that had long eluded her. Daniel's calm, supportive nature complemented Zara's fiery personality, and together they created a life filled with love and mutual respect. Zara's work with children and families affected by trauma became her passion, and she often spoke about how her experiences had shaped her ability to connect with others. At one family dinner, Zara shared a story about a young girl she had been working with. "She reminds me of myself at that age," Zara said. "Angry, confused, not sure who to trust. But I can see her starting to believe that things can get better, and it's the most incredible feeling." Sophia smiled at her sister. "You're making a real difference, Zara. That's something to be proud of." Lucas raised his glass to Zara. "For proving that no matter how broken things seem, you can always find a way to rebuild." As the three of them laughed and shared stories, I sat back and took it all in. The triplets were no longer defined by the betrayals of the past. They had forged new identities, rooted in resilience and a shared determination to build better lives for themselves and others. The triplets' 18th birthday had marked the beginning of the end for Ray's schemes, but it had also symbolized a turning point for our family. The years that followed were about healing, growth, and rediscovery. Zara's wedding had been a testament to how far we had come, a celebration of love and reconciliation. Sophia's groundbreaking work was shaping the future of ethical medical technology. Lucas's scholarship program was changing lives and redefining corporate values. And as for me, I had found a new role, not just as their father, but as someone they could look to for support, guidance, and unconditional love. As I watched my children carve out their paths, I realized something profound. The family we had become was not the one I had envisioned, but it was stronger, more resilient, and more united than I could have ever imagined. Together, we were building a legacy rooted not in the shadows of betrayal, but in the light of redemption and hope. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that the best was truly yet to come. Lucas leaned against the edge of the kitchen counter, his demeanor calm but reflective. "Dad," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "I just wanted to say something." I folded my arms, waiting for him to continue. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, glancing back toward the dining room where Zara and Sophia were laughing together. "I've been thinking about everything we've been through. About where we started and where we are now. It's different than I imagined, but it's better, you know?" I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "It's not the path we planned, but it's the one we've made work." Lucas smiled faintly. "Yeah. And I know I've said this before, but I really appreciate you sticking with me, through all of it. There were times when I was so angry, I couldn't see past it. But you never gave up on me." "I couldn't give up on you," I said simply. "You're my son. That's not something I'd ever walk away from." He exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. "I've been thinking about expanding the foundation," he said, shifting gears. "We've been getting interest from international organizations, people who want to collaborate on larger projects. I want to make sure it grows into something sustainable, something that'll last even when I'm not around to run it." "That's a big step," I said, impressed by his foresight. "Do you have a plan in mind?" "I do," he said, straightening up. "But I'd like your input. You've built something that's lasted. I could use your perspective." Hearing those words filled me with a quiet pride. "Of course. Let's set up a time to go over everything." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thanks, Dad." As the evening wound down, we all said our goodbyes. Sophia hugged me tightly, Zara kissed my cheek, and Lucas clapped me on the shoulder as they headed out. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching their taillights disappear down the driveway, a deep sense of gratitude settling over me. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had brought us to a place of healing and growth. Each of my children had found their way forward, carving out lives that reflected their unique strengths and lessons learned. Months later, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for one of Sophia's vaccine distribution centers. The triplets were all there, Zara with her newborn son in her arms, Lucas giving an impassioned speech about the importance of ethical leadership. Sophia, as always, was the driving force behind the event, her vision and determination shining through in every detail. As I stood there, watching my children interact with one another and the world around them, I realized that we had done more than rebuild our family. We had created a legacy rooted in resilience, love, and the belief that even in the face of betrayal, something beautiful could emerge. And for the first time in decades, I felt completely at peace. "Dad," Lucas said, his tone carrying a mix of warmth and gravity, "I know I've said it before, but thank you, for everything. For not giving up on us, even when we gave up on you." I placed a hand on his shoulder, meeting his gaze. "That's what family does, Lucas. We fight for each other, even when it's hard." As the years passed, the impact of our journey reached far beyond just our family. The company I had rebuilt with Sophia and our dedicated team became a model for ethical innovation, leading initiatives that transformed the healthcare landscape. Lucas's foundation redefined corporate responsibility, encouraging businesses to prioritize integrity alongside profit. Zara's work as a psychologist became a lifeline for countless families navigating their own struggles, her empathy and resilience shining through in everything she did. On the 5th anniversary of Lucas's scholarship program, we gathered at the Foundation's headquarters for a special ceremony. The triplets stood by my side as we unveiled a plaque inscribed with the program's mission, to inspire integrity, foster innovation, and build a better future. The applause that followed was deafening, a resounding acknowledgement of how far we had come. But my focus wasn't on the audience, it was on my children. Their smiles, their accomplishments, their resilience, they were living proof that we had overcome the darkness and found the light. In quieter moments, I often reflected on the journey that had brought us here. Betrayal had shattered our lives, but it had also given us the chance to rebuild, stronger and more united than I ever thought possible. The storm that had nearly broken us had, in the end, forged something unshakable. The waves outside my Caribbean home continued their timeless rhythm, a soothing reminder of life's cycles, destruction and renewal, chaos and calm. In those waves, I found peace, knowing that the legacy we had created would endure long after I was gone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I sat on the porch with my family. The triplets laughed and reminisced, their voices blending with the soft hum of the ocean breeze. Zara cradled her son, Sophia animatedly discussed her latest project, and Lucas shared updates on the Foundation's newest initiative. As I watched them, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had faced the storm, and though it had left its marks, we had emerged not just survivors but transformed. Together, we had created a legacy of love, resilience, and hope. And in the end, that was enough. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear what resonated with you. Take care, and until next time, keep finding the light in every storm.